Joining me on the program now from Queensland, Australia, Dr. Craig Heilmann. Craig, kia ora.
Kia ora, Andrew. Great to talk to you.
This, in some ways, is a bit deja vu. And if you look at the photos in the media, well, they look like similar. There's different words written on the placards, and there's certainly some different flags flying. But in some ways, very similar. But these protests couldn't be more different in terms of the theme, and also couldn't be more different in the way in which the government and the media in Australia has reacted to them. Talk us through what happened last weekend, Craig.
So we had massive anti-immigration marches throughout Australia, every major city, largely peaceful. The one in Melbourne got out of control. There were a few arrests and a bit of violence, but largely peaceful. But unfortunately, there are, I think you and I talked about this a few weeks back, Andrew, who said, as our politics in the West, or as our politicians in the West are less and less able to solve our problems, our politics is pulling and veering off further to the left and the right.
Yeah.
And so this march, in my mind, is exactly what you should expect to see when politicians aren't able to solve the problems that people have. And so you've got some right-wing extremists. They're definitely there,
yep.
Neo-Nazis, etc. As we say in our family, we just can't even understand how neo-Nazis exist after the history of everything, but apparently they do.
Yep.
But look, I think it would be wrong to read the room as saying this was about neo-Nazis, which is what the media and the government want to portray it as. I don't think it has anything to do with that. This is the average person saying the way you're governing me does not work for me. It just doesn't work for me. So that's what it is. It's. I would argue it's a middle class protest against the way the government is working.
Some of the critiques on this, and honestly, I think the neo-Nazi thing is a bit of a red herring on this one. Yes, there were bad actors involved in the same way that there were people who were Hamas sympathizers involved in the protests the previous weekend, but that doesn't reflect on everybody involved in the protest. The key difference, I think, though, is that last weekend the protests were against a foreign government, what Israel was doing in Gaza. This last weekend it was a protest against the current government, and perhaps that doesn't sit so well with the politicians, right?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, they don't want to see this happening at all, because this thing, starts to catch fire. And it can be very soon control can be lost over these sort of situations. But the government is not getting the message, because they're in the business of fundamentally trying to transform Australia. Now, I just got back from Sydney, Andrew, and I used to live in Sydney. I've lived there twice in my life. In fact, the area I was staying in was Parramatta. I was doing some work for a church out in Blacktown.
Yeah.
But Parramatta was where I was staying. I used to work in Parramatta 30 years ago for a couple, year or two. So I knew the area well. I'm telling you, apart from being able to identify a couple of street names like Church Street, which is identifiable because there is a church on it. Apart from that, mate, you wouldn't recognise Parramatta from 30 years ago. It's been transformed. We have homeless living on the streets. I literally couldn't recognise anything. I could have been in London, or I could have been in Amsterdam. That's what Sydney is beginning to look like. So the same sorts of issues that we see going on in Europe or whatever, they are happening in Australia. And the same sort of responses happening in Europe is spreading to Australia. It takes time for things to spread to Australia, and Australians maybe move a bit slower than other places like America, but at the end of the day, these things eventually land on our shores. And so what we're getting is a backlash to, I would argue, the continuation of a globalist agenda, which is, quite different to the traditional structures of Australian society.
There is an aspect of this, though, that at a surface level looks xenophobic, looks perhaps racist, and some commentators are saying that, look, if the immigrants that were coming to Australia were European, if they spoke good English, if they were middle class, there wouldn't be the protests. The protests are happening predominantly because the immigration is for people that don't look Australian. Is that a fair criticism, do you think?
I think it's fair on the one side. I think it's naive on the other. It's a bit like saying, I went to school class and the teacher was speaking to me in German. How comfortable are you going to be with that?
Yeah.
Or how comfortable would you be at a restaurant if the person speaking to you spoke to you continually in Spanish? It's going to be hard to order it. You're just not going to be comfortable. And so I think it's a normal human reaction for people to go, I'd rather be around people that at least speak my language or look a bit like me. I think you can denigrate that or go, actually, that's pretty fundamentally ordinary and normal. People
Yeah.
like predictability. And when people can speak your language, it makes life a whole lot more predictable than when they can't. So I think some common sense would say not all of it has to be put into a bad basket of people that hate other people. It's just your levels of comfort, you know. Now, let's face reality. Modern Australia doesn't exist without immigration, right?
Yeah.
Do you like what happened with the colonists or not? It's immigration.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, Aboriginals at some point had to have immigrated down here as well. They had to have passed over the
A few
land.
years beforehand.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Quite a few.
40 to 60,000, maybe who, 100,000 years, but
Yeah,
a long time, but still immigrants. Somebody had to walk down here when the seas weren't so high and get here. And so this is a normal human phenomenon. I think what these marches are showing us, though, is it's not actually being managed very well. And there's an element, I think, Andrew, where it's a little bit cynical because the biggest ethnic group, and I think we talked about this last week, but I'll say it again for our listeners, the biggest ethnic group being allowed into Australia is not Chinese, it's actually Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And the Indians, 85% vote Labor when they get here.
Yeah.
So the government has every incentive in the world to want to get as many Indians here as possible because they're getting 4 out of 5 votes from that group of people. And so it doesn't take very long for the average citizen to go, this just seems cynical. And it's coupled then with other things the government's doing. So let me give you one more that watch out for in New Zealand. We have freedom of information laws here. If you want to find out what your government's been up to as a citizen or as a journalist or whatever, you're allowed to. You can say, I want all the documents on X, and if you can do a finite search, you can get them.
Yep.
Guess what the government's doing now? No, it's going to cost you $50 or $100 to get those from the government now. Now, it's not like they've said, oh, you can't get those documents, but they're raising the bar in terms of how often you'd want to do that.
Yep.
You know, we're not going to have citizens just writing saying, I'd like all the information on the COVID decisions or whatever. It's just not going to happen anymore. And so only media organizations maybe or highly interested parties will be able to stump up with the money every time they want to see something. Now, to me, that just chills the average citizen's relationship with the government because it says we actually see ourselves as unaccountable to you. Even though you vote for us, we're unaccountable.
And it kind of reverses the thing about, so who's working for who here? Oh, that's right.
Well, that's right.
Exactly. Hey, just wanted to push into the area of immigration here because certainly from what I'm seeing, and I'd be interested also in your views in the way in which was reported on Australian media, because that's a different thing again. But it's not so much the immigration. It's not so much the immigrants who are coming here, but the rate at which it's done and the consequences in terms of the impact that this is having on social cohesion. This is the actual issue. It's not the immigrants per se. It's the policies and the impact of those policies on Australian quality of life.
Yeah, I don't accept the argument that this is about xenophobia or racism. There are racists in Australia, and there are people that are xenophobic. Let's accept that, and it's wrong. But Australia's had a long history, successful history of immigration and integration of people. So I don't think it's as easy to say as all Australians are racist and they're just unwelcoming to anyone that doesn't look like them. I think that's just fundamentally wrong. It's the pace at which this is being done and the transformation that people are experiencing. And there's like this social cohesion question. Obviously, what we talked about last week, marches of Palestinians worrying about something going on in another corner of the world and importing that into every major city in Australia seems odd to the average Australian. They go, look, that's a long way from our backyard. But this immigration question is in your face every day, and it affects people's housing, their ability to buy houses or to rent houses. Or, you know, I talk to people out trying to rent a house in Brisbane. They say there are 20 people ahead of you before you actually even get into the room to see whether you'd even like to rent that place. It's just creating social dynamics everywhere that are not cohesive. So the social cohesion question is the big one, and we are becoming less socially cohesive.
Just finally on this one, because there's a huge contrast in the way in which media reported one weekend's protest compared to another. And to be fair, there's a variety of different media in Australia, and there's left and right and some purportedly in the middle. Having said that, for the most part, previous weekends it was a march for freedom. Last weekend it was an angry mob.
That's right. Yeah. So this boils down to whether you view the world through the eyes of open borders or whether you think the world should have borders. And the people that were marching this weekend think there should be borders and that they should be policed. And the people that were voting last weekend and the people who support them, like much of the media, would say, look, we just shouldn't have borders at all. And so that's it. I mean, it's a worldview issue more than a story issue. I agree with you. Both marches are just political marches with people expressing their views.
Yep.
But how they're engaged with by the media storytellers is completely different in both cases.
Hey, interested to see the contrast in this way. And you know what? This is an export we don't need over here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Craig, you can keep your marches, I tell you. But good to have the opportunity. Having said that, good for people to have the freedom to be able to march and protest whatever their cause is, and regardless of whether or not I agree with their particular cause. Just saying. Craig, appreciate the wisdom, the insight that you bring to this program. Thanks for joining us.
God bless, Andrew. Take care.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.